Let me give a brief introduction, and then we'll get right into the meat of this. This session is entitled Teaching Methods, and today is March 18th. Is that correct? Day after St. Patrick, March 18th, 2008, and we are in Los Angeles, California, and they want us to say that because we don't know where we're at. And this is the 2008 CALLERLAB convention called Lights, Camera, Action, and that's a good title, isn't it? Whoever thought of that was an immediate genius, I tell you. Appreciate having everybody here. As we know, over the course of the years, the traditional way of conducting square dance classes of any kind has changed. People, not everybody, but lots of people are not willing to make the time commitment that we place upon them, and they're looking for alternatives. There are also different ways of doing things all over the country, and we're going to touch upon two of them that we know about. The one that Norm has, this is Norm Wilcox over here. Everybody give Norm a nice big hand. Norm is a member of the Board of Governors, and Norm is also a CALLERLAB accredited caller coach, and he's going to be talking about how things are done and the way people learn, not how they learn in each individual moves, but the structure of their class method up in Canada. So we'll turn it over to Norm, and then after Norm gets through with his presentations, we have a mic that's out in the audience, and it's being held by Mike. And he will be passing it around. If you have comments or questions, please raise your hand. We'll see you, and then we'll bring the mic to you because this is being recorded, and we want to get all your questions and comments and answers on record. So we'll let Norm Wilcox take over and start.
Thanks, Vernon. As Vernon said, the most common method of teaching dancers is to take them off the street and teach them the mainstream program between the months of September and May. We do things a little bit differently. Let me just give you a brief history of maybe how we got there. I started calling in 1962. Wheel and deal had just been invented. There were no ocean wave calls whatsoever. And the only guidance we have for what to teach was on the sets in order basic 50 calls. So we taught those. And then Sets in Order came out with a second list of 25 more calls, and we taught those. We taught the first 50 calls in one season, and then in the second season we taught the second 25. Calls are being invented at a furious rate, and we had to pick which calls to keep, which ones to drop. And we ended up with 3 sections in each club. We called them beginner, intermediate, and club levels. And these roughly correspond, I say roughly, corresponded to what we now refer to as basic, mainstream, and plus. But we had tons and tons of dancers. My beginner classes regularly had 12 squares of dancers in those days. And so we had lots and lots of people. In 1974, CALLERLAB was formed, and the first convention in St. Louis created a list of calls, and we called it mainstream. Back home in Canada, we adjusted our programs to fit with the mainstream list, but we didn't teach the entire list. I forget when basic was actually identified. I was going to look it up and didn't. But at some point, the basic portion of the mainstream list was identified. But at that time, it wasn't. We arbitrarily chose a point which we stopped teaching in the first season. And we taught the remainder of the mainstream calls in the second season. And then dancers would move on. There was no plus at that time, so they would move into what we called our club-level clubs. And the calls they were taught there, a lot depended on individual callers. Because the new calls are coming out, we workshop them, don't like that, do like this. We keep some, drop most of them. And it was kind of a hodgepodge thing. And now we fast forward to the present. We still, in a lot of cases, in most cases, I think, at least in Ontario, where I come from, which is a province much larger than Texas, located to the east, north, and west of the Great Lakes. We still teach the basic program in the first season. And now, depending on the club, depending on the caller, depending on the area, the mainstream, the remainder of the mainstream calls could be taught possibly in a summer workshop. That's been done. It's also they would move into the second section of the club, and each year that club would recycle back to the beginning of the mainstream, teach the mainstream calls, and that's how they learn to dance mainstream. Beyond that, we won't discuss because we're not ready in that part of the program. But as classes and club sizes decreased, some clubs had to combine their basic and mainstream classes. And so we have situations where a club would have, say, a 2.5-hour dance, and they go tip and tip, a basic tip, a mainstream tip, basic mainstream tip. The basic dancers were aided by the fact that mainstream dancers were there to angel them, and then they would basically have to sit out during the mainstream tips. Or they organize it differently where they would run, say, a 3-hour dance and maybe an hour and a half at basic, an hour and a half at mainstream. There are many combinations of these things. Moving along in time, there are things which made us modify our approach even further. I don't know how the age of the dancers are in the areas you guys call to, but where we are, a lot of our dancers are now in the retired part of their life. They've finished working, they've retired, they are now older. Some of them have quite a bit of disposable income, and because they may have sold their homes and moved into a condo or moved into a retirement village. And what this translates into, first of all, they can't learn as fast. Secondly, they can't retain the calls the way they used to. And thirdly, they'll disappear for 3 or 4 weeks. They've got a vacation. And they say, well, we won't see you. We'll see you until the 1st of March or something like this. So this complicates matters. And in some cases, we have problems even finishing the basic list in one season, let alone trying to teach the mainstream as well. My philosophy in teaching classes is that each class should be a dance where new callers are taught, as opposed to a time interval where a lot of calls are taught and dancing is at a minimum. I focus on the dance aspect, and this is probably why I take longer to teach, because I want people to dance. I want them to come and have an enjoyable time. People will say, how long it take to learn to dance? I said, about 5 minutes. And this is true. Within 5 minutes they're dancing. Mind you, they don't know a lot of dance, so they don't know they don't know. And so each week they learn a little more, but they're dancing, and that's why they came for us, to dance. Now, what I did for one class, and this was, again, a class of older people, was I took a look at the basic list, and because of the disparity between the number of calls in basic and the number of calls in mainstream, it's 53 in basic and 17 in mainstream, I think is the break point. I deferred all the ocean wave material to later. Swing through, runs, trades, circulates, all of that I moved sort of in my mind to a later time and taught them to dance things up to that point. This gave me a shorter list to work with. Now, I was able to do this because I controlled the dancing program at that particular club. We dance essentially 2 dances in one session. The first, as I described earlier, we danced an hour and a half with the beginners, and the second was their second season, where we attempted to teach them the remainder of the basic list and some of the mainstream. So things are going slowly. The only drawback, of course, to this is where else can they dance? And there is a club in the town where they live. By the way, this is in a retirement village, and there is a town club, a city club, and they have a class and a mainstream on a Tuesday night where they go tip and tip. That's their organization. And then they have a plus club on a Wednesday night. So they do have access, those that are eager and those that can learn quickly do have access to that venue. But the ones who can't, don't, or don't really care can stay in the village and dance there, and it doesn't matter. Nobody will come in to tell them that there's a whole lot more you can dance out in the outside world, because in this particular village you can't dance there unless you live there. So we're kind of isolated, and it made for a much more comfortable way of doing things because I could control everything they did, and they just came and square danced. They didn't really know about the outside world. I would mention it to them, but I didn't make a big point of it. Whatever system we use to teach dancers, whether it be something along the lines of what we're doing in Canada, where we teach the basic program in 1 year and the mainstream in the second, or any other type of a system which Vernon may be getting into, the end result is they must have somewhere where they can dance at the end of it. They got to have somewhere they can go. This may mean, as callers, we'll have to set our own programs up. I know a lot of you work for clubs where the club controls the class. Unfortunately, in most cases in our area, this doesn't happen. In most cases, we, as callers, determine the programs in conjunction with the clubs, but we actually control the programs and what the dancers will dance and what they will learn and how fast they will learn it. So we do have a little more of a control aspect at that time. But we may end up having, if you are not in that situation, you may end up having to set up your own program where you control everything and produce dancers who will eventually go into the quote unquote mainstream of square dancing. I believe that by taking more time to teach dancers, we will retain more of them. And if we emphasize on the dancing aspect rather than on the constant learning over a long period of time, we will attract people who are used to having quick fixes. In today's world, people want instant this, instant that. They're not willing to commit 9 months of their life to learn how to square dance. But if they are approached with the idea, well, come and join the club and you will dance. Not necessarily learn, but you will dance. And each week we do teach them, but we emphasize the dancing aspect. And I think that the bottom line with that will be we will attain more dancers because they aren't overloaded with constantly having to learn new calls. That's the way I see it.
Thanks, Norm. Any, questions or comments for Norm? Anywhere, anybody? We have one right over here, Mike. Please state your name and where you're from and what your point is.
Randy Doherty. Norm, when you say you kind of encourage the dancing part of it, do you get into the sociability more when you're at that particular phase in your instruction?
Yeah. We encourage them to socialize. And by maybe just quickly reviewing what I do at a class, and in the first tip is a warm-up. Teach only calls that they've learned up to last week. Second tip, we review the calls we taught last week. Third tip, we teach whatever we're going to teach that night or that day. In between, there are breaks, and as the dancers are getting older, the breaks are getting longer. And I've noticed I used to time my breaks for 3. Back when when I first started calling in 62, I'd time my breaks, but I used to smoke then. I smoke a half a cigarette. We dance 3 hours and we take a half a cigarette break. I set my timer now for 6 to 7 minutes between tips. And even then I'm seeing them slowly getting up. So, they're sitting there chatting and, I don't discourage this now. So I guess in that respect, I'm encouraging them to socialize by giving them time to do so.
I did something for the first time 2 or 3 years ago when I was in the ABC program. We started doing the potluck type thing. Now in Mesa, those people are usually home and bed by 9 o'clock. And we would start a 7 o'clock dance or 7:30. We were starting at 7:30. We actually called till 10 o'clock and never had anybody ever leave early. And the sociability part was put back into it, and we maintained a pretty good-sized crowd.
Anybody else?
Bob Riggs, Colorado. One of the comments I liked hearing what you're presenting is we've focused to a large extent on how fast we can get through the class, how short the class can be in a lot of the discussions we've had over the last couple of years. one of the things that I see as an outcome of that is that we have lost what I call the life change, the life transition. As we're trying to recruit new dancers into our activity, we're not just trying to teach them to square dance, we're trying to change what they do with their recreational time. And the shorter the class is, the less opportunity you have to actually change what they do and how they interact with the world. And a class like yours, you're effectively taking almost 2 seasons to change them from being bowlers and bingo players to being square dancers. And I think that's a point we have to think about as we balance between the length of a class and the time that they're committing to it and the fact that we really want them to change. We just don't want to, it's not like going to a ballroom class, taking it, and then forgetting it. We actually want them to participate after they finish the class.
Very good. Over here, Mike. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to go to Virgil. Then over
Virgil
here.
Forbes from Maryland. Norm, I have one of my 3 clubs is very much like yours. It's centered on a, quote, mature, active adult community, unquote. You got to be 55 to move in. And much like you, they advertise they're a plus club. They aren't. They're a mainstream club that dances 5 or 6 plus calls. And I don't make any bones about that. And like you, I've run into time constraints. They used to dance 8 to 10. Now they dance 6:30 to 8:30. Hey, that's okay. I just have dinner after the dance. But I'm in the Baltimore, Washington metro area where the club level is plus. Now, I've been successful thus far in isolating this club from the larger square dance picture. Not that they mind. My other clubs I got a problem with because there is the rush to plus, which we have not successfully stopped. And I have 2 or 3 solutions that I've been working for a couple of years, but I would like to hear your opinion of in an area where we really the local area is plus, how can we get there successfully without killing our dancers?
I honestly don't have an answer for you, other than if the clubs insist on dancing plus. Again, go back to the caller. The caller may have to organize, and you may have to set up your own club. It would be wonderful if we could have basic level clubs. Even in our area, we don't have them as such. Basic dancing clubs. That is where they come and dance the basic program. And if there is, most places they come in their second season to learn the remainder of the mainstream calls, which is a different situation than coming and dancing the basic club. It would be ideal if they could do that. But with the declining numbers, it's all a matter of choices. Maybe you're going to have to, or callers are going to have to set up their own, or really convince the clubs that they need to do this, to have a place where people can come and dance a limited number of calls, whatever they are, be it basic program or be it a shortened basic program or whatever. That eventually, by doing this, the numbers won't drop. They will eventually, it'll be a long-term thing, but eventually they'll reap the success of it.
Let's go over here to Al.
Al Shaw from Round the Lab.
And then we'll move on.
You indicated that you start in September. Is there a way for Joe and Ethel, who joined the village in November, to participate?
We were just starting to get into a system whereby they could. We haven't been able to implement it successfully yet, but we're hoping that we can by running a system similar to the ABC system, where people can come in at different times. But so far, the answer at this point is no.
Art Harvey, Las Cruces. I agree with Norm. It's up to the callers to have to start their own programs. I don't know how many of you knew Dick Ledger back in Bristol, Rhode Island. He only called through basic. And he would teach his dancers, and he'd keep them for about 3 years before they decided to move on to mainstream. I moved from Southern California to Las Cruces 5 years ago. The two clubs there, and the one in Silver City, it's mainstream with Announced Plus, and had several dancers that wanted to move up to Plus, so I started a Plus group myself 4 years ago. And it's up to the callers. If you want to keep a program going, you've got to start it out, and we do need more basic program clubs.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a short presentation on an alternative way of learning to dance to CALLERLAB programs. If there wasn't a need for an alternative, then we wouldn't be talking about what I'm fixing to be talking about. If you're going to be a salesperson of any kind and try to sell a product of any kind, you're going to be hit with objections. Objections are a natural thing that people throw at you and basically tell you they don't want to buy your product. If you have a solution for their objections, then they're easily swayed or convinced or they'll buy from you. Several years ago, I was approached, and first of all, I'm going to talk about the thing that I'm going to talk about is called Fast Track. There are many other different names out there. Blast is something that's out there, and that's a brainchild of Scott Byers, who's back in the back, and I'm sure he'll have some comments and suggestions here in a little bit. Is moving great guns and going in different is being widely accepted and being used. Scott and I were doing a panel a couple of years ago in Charlotte, and it was on this type of thing, but it was also multi-cycle. And I consider Fast Track, i.e. Blast, a form of multi-cycle because it allows you to have multiple starts during the year. I went first on my presentation, and then Scott went next, and we had no idea what we were going to talk about. And then once I got through, Scott looked at me and he said, it was the same presentation, it was the same format, just different names. He didn't know I was doing mine, and I didn't know he was doing his. We got together, and basically, we don't care what you call it. If you want to try it, do it. The term Fast Track came about because a couple came to me several years ago and wanted to know, is there an accelerated way to be able to learn to dance the mainstream program? And we came up with the idea of multiple Saturdays. As a matter of fact, at that time, we didn't even have a name for it. We just called it consecutive Saturdays. We tried 2 at the beginning, and then it was quite obvious after 2 that wasn't enough. We went from 8 till 4:30, the first ones. And then we found out real quickly that was too much. We realized that at sometime during the day we weren't going to be able to teach anymore because people can only absorb so much and then they get overloaded. And that happened starting at 8. That happened about 2 o'clock. What we also found out is about 2:30 we started having trouble with circle left because they had so much during the day that they just couldn't do anymore. So after that, we started going to 3 Saturdays and starting at 9 o'clock and ending at 3 o'clock. We have since gone from 3 Saturdays to 4 Saturdays. We find that we can get pretty much through the mainstream program, and it's all depending on the people that you have. People learn at different paces. Sometimes we can get all the way through. Sometimes we can't. We also realize that during the course of those 4 Saturdays that we are merely showing people the dance movements. That is not getting them the repetitive time that they need in order to practice their craft. And it goes back to what Norm said. If you don't have a place for them to go practice their craft, it doesn't make any difference what they've learned. They're going to forget it. So that kind of program needs to be in place. A lot of people will always ask me, what kind of a lesson plan do you use for these consecutive Saturdays? And my answer to them is whatever lesson plan you're using now. It will work. A lot of common sense has to go into what you're doing. If people seem like they're getting tired, it's time to rest. If they seem like they're not getting tired, then you can go on. The learning tips that we use vary. Sometimes they're long, sometimes they're not. The breaks that we take vary. Sometimes short, sometimes long. During the breaks that we have, we always try to make sure that they are not dead times. We use the breaks, one, to socialize and get to people know everybody's names. Two, we use the breaks to demonstrate how to do either an upcoming movement that we're going to be learning, or how to properly do the one that we just got through learning. For example, if you're doing ladies chain, while you're taking a break, you get the people up, or you get a square up, and you show how the man doesn't stand there waiting for the lady to come to him. You show them that the man gets ready to do a courtesy turn so you can walk right into it. We don't like a lot of downtime. Don't like a lot of time where they can start thinking and drifting and this kind of thing. We want to make sure that there's always something going on, even if it's just talking to them. We include a lot of historic information during those downtime. People who are learning to dance are thoroughly amazed that square dancing can be done all over the world, and that it's done in English. And so we take the time to talk to them about that. One of the questions that we always get asked is, what is the age group of these people? Because most folks think that just because we're doing consecutive Saturdays all day long that we automatically have a bunch of young people, and the answer could be nothing further than the truth. We are marketing and getting the same people that everybody else is getting. What we find is their endurance level is more or better than what we think it is. With some common sense and not dragging them down and pushing them too hard during the day, they'll last all day long. One of the keys that we use, or that we have found out to help them last all day long, is in the area of nutrition. We provide nutrition for them. The reasons are two. First of all, if we give them a lunch break and they leave, 9 times out of 10 they won't come back. So we provide lunches for them. The lunches are very easily done. Anything, sandwiches or some kind. As a matter of fact, a lady came up with a great idea. And I love chili dogs, my personal favorite. But one lady came up with a great idea to have Frito pie. And if you don't know what Frito pie is, that's chili with Fritos in it. And she went to the local Sam's and got a bunch of the individual little Frito packages and snipped the tops of it off and poured chili in that and had plastic spoons. So that was what they used. If you wanted something else, you just got another bag and poured the chili in it, ate it, and threw it away. It was a great thing. So lunch doesn't have to be hard. But again, we want to provide that for them so that they won't leave. We want to keep them there. The biggest, most important part of nutrition, I think, is providing them something in the morning and all day long that will keep them up and active. We don't provide, a big drawn out breakfast in the morning, but we give them things like fruit, grapes and watermelons and cantaloupes and that kind of thing. Make sure that there's plenty of water to drink. We don't want a lot of soft drinks. We definitely do not want a lot of pastries, because that makes us heavy and tired and sleepy. Fruit increases metabolism. Now, then I don't want to get into an argument, but back at home, my hobby is hunting, and you can badmouth me later, but I don't care. But you wouldn't believe how much warmer you can get on a cold day by eating fruit, because fruit increases the metabolism, and the metabolism in your body produces body heat, and which produces energy. So we have a lot of fruit for people to eat while they're out, and they'll eat it all day long. One of the things that we find out in fast track, and like I said, fast track is a term, blast is another term. I'm hearing of one up in the Northeast that somebody's put together called Blitz. It's basically the same format. Bear Miller uses one that he calls Survivor Series. Isn't that appropriate? Where he's using consecutive days. Your consecutive days could be consecutive Saturdays in a row during the course of a month. It could be, there are people who are using Friday, Saturday, and Sundays and doing a weekend type of thing out of it. Whatever works for you is a great way and another alternative. It's not, a lot of people get upset because they think we're trying to replace the traditional way of learning, and that is nothing is further from the truth. We are just providing an alternative, and that's what this is. Retention rates. As far as people, the first 3 years that we did this, we kept really good records, and we haven't been keeping as good as records as we should have. But the first 3 years, 95% of the people who entered the fast track class finished, and that's who wouldn't like that kind of a percentage. during those 3 years, 85% of the people who finished were still dancing 3 years later. And so we took surveys from them, and basically what we got out of those surveys is the reason they got into dancing, they stayed dancing, and they enjoyed dances is because we got them into the dance atmosphere as quickly as possible. We didn't keep them in the first grade for long amounts of time. There's nothing wrong with being in the first grade, but people don't want to stay in the first grade. They want to move up. And so we got them into the dancing atmosphere with their friends and the people who belong to the club quicker that way. But we also found out that we were pleasantly surprised at the lack of review time that we had to go through from Saturday to Saturday. You would think that when you learn a great deal of material, and you do, we throw a bunch at you in the course of a day, that there would be a lot of review the following Saturday, and we found that was simply not the case. People really learned and retained, and we didn't have to do a lot of review. Of course, a lot of that, now that would vary from class to class simply because of people's learning abilities. And I completely forgot where I was going with the next topic, and it was there, but then it went away, and I apologize for that. Do what? What about seniors? Oh, I'm a senior citizen. Huh, that was a joke, much like the one about British Columbia and Texas was a while ago, wasn't it? Ontario, is that what it was? Pardon me.
That's why the U.S. and Canada will never amalgamate. Texans will never allow anything bigger than Texas.
Yeah, that's right. But we have been using it now for the past 9 or 10 years, and it works really, really well. We also consider it, like I said, a form of the multi-cycle program because we have clubs in the area that will do a 4-Saturday class in January. They will wait the month of February and then start again a new one in the month of March. What that allows is we all know that new dancers are their most enthusiastic early. And they want to go tell their friends, hey, we're learning this and we're having a lot of fun. And 9 times out of 10, they have to tell them, but you have to wait until September to learn this. Now we have an alternative for them. They don't have to wait until September to learn how to do this. They can, they can wait a month. If your club wants to do one every month, then they can certainly do that. I would advise against that because it does make for long days. And the club members do need to take a break in between times. But it's a great way to have 3 or 4 or more starts during the course of the year. And I don't have a handout for what we're talking about today, but if you'll go to the CALLERLAB website, there are articles, and there is Scott's description of Blast is there under Winning Ways in different places, and it was also in American Square Dance here a few months back, a good explanation. If you look in American Square Dance magazine for the past month, Doug and Don Sprosty out of Iowa have tried their fast track approach, and I talked to them 6 or 7 months ago, and they gave it a whirl, and they thoroughly enjoy it. There are many different articles under Winning Ways that tell about how to do this, and you can use your own name. You can call it whatever you want, but it is an alternative to people who don't want to sign up for the long amounts of times. Questions, please, bring them back.
Tom Dillner, Kentucky. Are you teaching this program yourself, or are you finding someone that you can work with and share that time?
Good point, and thank you. You just reminded me what I had forgotten about. We have tried this several different ways. The first few ways that we tried it with multiple callers. The reason being is that we wanted new dancers to get used to somebody else's voice. We all know that when new dancers go out to their first dance and it's not you calling, they're frightened. And we wanted to eliminate that. So we got them used to different voices right off the bat. When we work together, we found that unless you had a really good teaching order that all 4 were agreeable to, that it was in most cases better to go straight down the list. we would probably all agree that our personal preference is that's not the best way to go. But when we were using multiple people and everybody had their own idea, we found it was easier to go down the list. Some callers didn't want to participate because they didn't want to go straight down the list, and they taught something over here. They said they knew where they were going with that. Well, the problem is the person behind them might not know where they were going with that. So we used multiple people to get them used to different voices, and we went straight down the list. We have tried it using the same person throughout the 4 Saturdays, and myself included, and that's a good thing. You can probably get a little further along, but still there's that first dance apprehension that people go out to, and they say circle left, and then people say, that don't sound like Vernon, and they get scared. And so I really like the idea of using multiple people. Yes?
Ernie Kenny, Ontario, Texas. You mentioned a club. Your clubs are involved with these Saturday groups too?
Yeah, yes. When we first started out, we started out with a club group. It caught on in the area that I am in Dallas-Fort Worth that our local association picked up on it. And so the local association would help the clubs, and I believe in local associations helping clubs as much as they can. They would provide the place and the advertising, and the other clubs would go out and get people and bring them to this centrally located place to do that. It worked, and this, if I'm lying, I'm flying. It worked so well that people in the association got upset and jealous about it, and they no longer do it. Does that surprise y'all? No, I'm not going to say who. It's a dancer association. But it worked so well. The association, if I'm lying, I'm flying, actually made money on the thing, but there is always that snippet group that doesn't like anything new, and it works, and I that's the phrase I use. It works so well that they quit doing it. But we had a lot of clubs pick it up.
Okay. Well, and you may have said this, and I didn't catch it. You said now you do 4 Saturdays, and what hours now? I have 2 questions. That's one of them. What hours now?
We start at 9, and sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 3:30, somewhere along those lines.
Well, I heard you say that, but I didn't know you said that for the 4 Saturdays. All right, and the other question is, are you teaching the whole mainstream program on these Saturdays, or are you? And I'm not talking about. I'm talking about like the extra calls. Are you teaching all of them too, or what are you doing?
Yeah, we're getting all the way through. We are getting all the way through. Now, then a key to that is that there's 2 of them. In the present day way of learning class is that clubs always take people the second and third night. And common sense says you cannot take anybody new after you start that first Saturday, because you learn so much that first Saturday. If you bring somebody in, you're dead. Second of all, you've also, and this gets a little selfish, but Scott will, I'm sure will attest to it, that you've got to show people how to do it. You've got to explain to people how to do it. You've got to let them read it. That's how people learn. And then you've got to demonstrate it. You've got to dance it, and then you've got to move on. And that's a selfish way of being, I know. But unfortunately, we can't please everybody, so we go to the majority. If you've got to show it, teach it, let them read, demonstrate it, dance it, get them used to it, and then move on to the next one.
I guess there's 2 questions because you just hit me with another one. The first question is, what kind of follow-up? After they finish this, are they really ready to just go right into the regular club dancing, or do the clubs need to do some follow-on classes as part of their club? And then the second question, what you just said, I heard the words, let them read it. How do you work that into your Saturday class?
Oh, with the ever-popular dance movement sold by Tom Dillard back in the back then. How was that for us? Oh, that's one of the things. Do not plug anybody else's product. But I'm not going to lie. That's how we do it. We provide that. We provide that for them. Oh yeah, most definitely. They can take that time. We'll now then, not on their own. When we gather them during break time, we'll gather them around and give them the books and say, here's what we got. Here's what we're going to be doing the next time we get up. If you want to take a minute, read it. After you've read it, we're going to get a couple up or a square up, and we're going to show you how to do it, and then we're going to get you up, and we're going to walk you through it. You had another question? And there's no, do what? Okay. I'm sorry. Repeat the question, Randy. There's the mic, please.
The question was, what is the follow-up after the class ends?
And I believe part of your question was, are they ready for the club environment? And I'm not going to lie. No, they're not. If you do not have a program to get them used to practicing their craft after they come out of this learning process, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. You've got to have places for them to go dance. Now, then one thing our local dancer association did do is they learned that we were putting a lot of people out on the floor, and so they encouraged new dancer dances, and they encouraged clubs, even if they didn't have a new dancer class going on, to provide a new dancer dance. And the way they encouraged them is that they provided free advertisement in their magazine for them for that particular dance. The association guaranteed them if they had a new dancer dance that they would bring, the association would bring at least 3 squares themselves. They also put some prerequisites and requirements on these new dancer dances. Now, that I'm not going to get into an argument of this is good, this is bad, but one of the requirements for the new dancer dances is that if there was anything going on before the dance, that it not be pre-rounds or lines, that it be a workshop. The reason being, this is a new dancer dance. It's geared towards them. If there were rounds at the dance, and there was usually 2, that during the new dancer dance they did 1. The reason being is that we want the new dancer people on the floor as much as possible. Also, in our area, the main, not 100%, but we do mainstream with 1 plus tip during the night. That plus tip be eliminated. And the reason being is that we wanted those people on the floor as much as possible.
Scott Byers, Sacramento, California. I want to reiterate what Vernon was saying, that they are not ready for prime time. Okay, they're not ready. You have to have a place for them to go. What they're ready for is workshop. That's what they're ready for. And you've got to have a place for them to go to workshop this. I found in a year of classes, and I've done hundreds of classes, in a year of classes, the dancers don't have all the calls in a year of classes anyway, and it needs 6 months to a year for them to actually learn the level that they're dancing. They have to workshop it for that. The blast class, all that does is gets them to see the calls that are there, gets them into your club, puts a badge on them, lets you put your arms around them and say, we love you, you're ours. And that's what keeps people in square dancing. Because of the hugs, you're ours, the warm and fuzzies.
Actually, he was first.
Back to the back, wasn't it?
Where?
Well, either of those 2 nice young gentlemen there.
Real quick, Tom Dillon, are you spending much time doing singing calls?
Absolutely. But by the end of the first 30 minutes to an hour, I'm doing a singing call of some kind. I don't care if it's circle left, circle right, and promenade. We're doing a singing call of some kind.
Does that basically end up being your reinforcement?
Yes, without a doubt, yes. Too many times I have seen callers do singing calls and don't use the calls they just got through just teaching. So, yeah, that is a reinforcement avenue for us.
Charlie Fagan, Torrance, California. Do you put together a graduation party for them?
We give them some kind of a certificate, but this is a personal preference. I don't want to get in an argument. I don't like graduation ceremonies to a degree. And too many times the dancers who are the experienced dancers remember the things that they went through, and they can't wait to do that to somebody else. And I don't like the fact that I'm going to make fun of somebody. I don't like to be made a fool, and I don't like to make new people made a fool of them. And you know the types of things we're talking about. Oh yeah, they laugh, ha ha, and this, that, and the other, but then they turn around and they don't come back, and we can't figure out why.
Virgil Forbes, Maryland. I've got a slightly different program, but the concept is the same. Get new dancers into the club environment. Mine is ALPS, Accelerated Learning Program for Squares. Whoopee, different name. It's a Friday night, 3-hour, starts like a first nighter, but the emphasis goes beyond. And then Saturday, 10 to noon, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, with catered lunch and potluck supper, and a Saturday night dance with no learning, just dancing. And then every Friday night, club dance at whatever they know, with a workshop tip in the middle. Kind of like, remember the old third tip was always the workshop? Well, that's what we're doing. We get 2/3 of the basic list in that Friday night, Saturday night. Cherry pick. Not everything out of the basic list, but about 2/3 of it. And then from the middle of September, it takes me until December or January to finish through exposure, not learning, exposure through the mainstream list. But the club dances every Friday. My new dancers dance every Friday. In the last 2 years, I've put 43 new club members in square dancing. And by the way, I'm with you. They need a different voice. Mid-November, 7 weeks into their program, Bill Harrison comes and does the dance for me, and the dancers love him.
That was just a joke. But Wayne, one comment for me that I just thought of, that this is a great avenue for dancers who danced before and now want to come back. A lot of people call them retreads, and they don't want to, they know, I don't want to go through all of that, boo, this, that, and the other. This is a great avenue to bring them in, because in a month's time, they will probably catch up with everything they forgot. So, keep that in mind. That's a great avenue for them, Wayne.
What I was wondering is that after the January group is through, and then you skip a month and you go to March, do the people that finish in January come to the March and help you out regarding angels and stuff?
Oh, no doubt. That
would give them
that gives them some extra practice time.
Well,
yes,
it gives
it does.
you the dance time you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. The people that go through for instance, the January, are more than welcome and highly encouraged and invited to attend the March one. Even if they get one of their friends, of course we want them there. But they are encouraged to attend again, and we don't charge them for that. Probably should. But that's one of the things, we try to entice people to come along, that we've already got your money once, come on again, because we want them in the end to be club members. I have mixed feelings about free stuff, because I've talked to people who have said that if it's that cheap, then there can't be any fun or value to it. So, there are different ways to go, but most definitely, they are welcome to come back and highly encouraged. Yes.
This really isn't the same as your teaching program and whatever. This is kind of a compliment to any teaching program that you're doing. But 3 years ago, I talked Dave Harry from Seattle, Washington area. I talked one of my clubs into sponsoring a once-a-month dance for new dancers. And it is now part of our regular club dance program. Our club dance is twice a month. One is a regular mainstream dance. The other dance is a student dance, and it incorporates both our September starties and our January starties, and we flop back and forth as the evening goes along. And again, there are no round dances, or very few round dances in it. If we do something outside of square dancing, it's a line dance during the break time, or an easy round dance that we teach everybody, and it's been extremely successful. Average club dance in the Seattle area is like 4 to 8 squares. This program's average is 6 to 12 squares every dance. So it's doing well, and it's worth something to look at for any club as far as that goes, to sponsor a regular dance that your students go to monthly or bi-monthly or whatever.
Ernie Kinnigan from Alaska. The largest state in the world. I kind of scare my dancers into staying into square dancing by opening up that the average person must hear a call 100 times to be able to react without thinking. As we grow older, maybe 125, maybe 150. Teenagers, 3. Those who get upwards of 200 times usually become callers.
I'm sorry, Ernie. I thought you had something important to contribute.
Okay, so I won't give him the microphone anymore.
Yeah, please don't do that anymore. Anybody else? Yes, all over the place.
Pat Zeman, Victoria, British Columbia. When you use 4 callers, you said, do you use them all like on the same day, or is it one day for one day for the other, one day for the third, one day for the fourth?
We use them one day each. If they're close to where the class is being held, we encourage them to come by at some point during the day if they're around. We're going to introduce them and say this is the person who's going to be teaching you next Saturday, and then get them up to do a little bit, so they'll get used to that. But it's each day.
Bob Tucker, Wichita, Kansas, and I've been using Fast Track before I knew it had a name. It was Vernon's program. We do 4 Saturdays. We do 9 to 3, provide the lunch. One little difference is I found that I need to delay the lunch until about 12:30. Because of the afterwards. But we do go to 3 o'clock. And usually the last 45 minutes, I don't teach anything. I just call everything they've learned as a review, because they are deer in the headlight look. And I want to reiterate what Vernon and Scott both said about putting your arms around them. I'm fortunate to have a club that does that. And that is the only way you can get people in. And I will also say that I have the exact same retention rate that Vernon quoted earlier. And Vernon's calling at my club on Sunday night, and I'll have 7 new dancers there for you, so take care of them. Ages 16 to about 60.
Great. And that's so important, making them feel a part of the group and showing them a good time. People leave and they'll give you 1,000 reasons why they leave, but it's probably not the right one. But I assure you that nobody has ever said, I had too much of a good time and I couldn't take it anymore, so I'm leaving. Or I felt too welcomed and that wasn't what I wanted, so I left.
All right, Andy Alameo, San Diego. My question for you is, how much and how do you charge? In other words, do you charge them all at once? Because they're going to have to go through the whole program. They can't join midstream. And what's the general charge that you have?
Don't touch the buttons.
I guess I don't do that on a personal basis. I don't conduct that, and so that's a club thing. That's not always a good thing. That's probably something that, I know that's something as we as callers should get more involved in. But it's whatever you charge. I guarantee you, it's along the same lines, and you bet we ask for it up front. We want them in. If we do a good job of selling, the price or the cost should not be a factor. I know cost of money is important, but if you do a good job of selling, then the product of the value that you're providing or that you're giving should be enough that when they walk through the door within the first hour, we have money.
Scott Byers, Sacramento, California. I want to answer his question from my standpoint. We charge up front. That's what we do. It keeps them there. It's another incentive for them to come back because we've already got their money. We charge about, depending upon what we're teaching, what level we're teaching, it's anywhere from $15 a person per day is pretty much what we charge. And I've done this all the way up through C2, and it works beautifully. Yes. It's $15 a day, is somewhere around there.
And I want to reiterate what Scott just said before we come up here to Keith, is that this is not just for mainstream. This is for any program. There are people who are using it for plus, which is pretty easy, but there are people who are doing it for advanced and in the challenge programs too. And I believe have you run one of your challenge programs through it?
Yeah, I've gone all the way up through C2.
There you go. Okay, repeat that, Scott, please,
sure.
So it'll be on the recording.
C1 is in 3 sessions. C2 is in 3 sessions.
Good. Now, Keith. Run, Mike.
Keith Ferguson, Saratoga, California. The touchy question, do you get people sometimes in the class that just are not going to be able to do this? And if so, how do you handle it? And do they drop out? Do you have to talk to them? And do you offer refunds?
Yes. And that happens with any group. I don't care where it is. You've got some people who can't get it. You've got some people who can't get it and don't realize it. and you have to talk to them. But the thing about this is that that doesn't come to a head or a realization halfway through. That'll happen by noon. Guarantee you. It'll happen by noon, and sometimes it's an unpleasant task, but sometimes to protect the majority, you have to bite the bullet and take a hard step, and that occurs, and you just got to do it and get it over with. And yes, at that particular point, we will provide a refund. Nobody else? Yes. I'm hungry.
To respond to that last question, Virgil Forbes again. We try to prevent some of that. One of the brochures that we put out has a little paragraph in it saying, this is a physical activity. You're going to be doing 8 hours of physical moving. Please be honest with yourself. If you can't do it, you're going to create a problem for the pleasure of the other 7 dancers in your square. So we try to be a little preemptive on the physical or mental problems, more physical in our area with aging. But we try to be a little proactive on that.
Good. With that, we will conclude the session. We hope you've had a good time. It's lunchtime, and you may go, and hope you have a rest of your convention and a good time.